So let's talk about the neighborhood. Why does the neighborhood matter? Well, we all have them. We all live in them. And if you've heard that expression, home is where the heart is, the neighborhood can be seen as the body that surrounds that heart, nurturing it, protecting it, taking care of it every day. Turns out the neighborhood is where we spend the majority of our time. And if you own your home, maybe the majority of your money. The people in the neighborhood, your neighbors, well, they quickly become one of the most important communities in our lives. It's that community where our children grow up, where they play and go to school, where they make the memories that last them the rest of their lives. This is actually where I grew up. This is where I was a child, a small city in West Texas called Odessa. This is what Odessa looks like. Now, I'm guessing that most of the people in this room have never heard of Odessa or seen it, and that's okay. If you have, maybe it's because you're familiar with our very famous high school football team, which has been the subject of a best-selling book, a movie, and a TV series called Friday Night Lights. Or maybe you know that Odessa is part of the Permian Basin, which is one of the most important oil and gas areas in the world. Or if you know your presidential trivia, you may know Odessa as the hometown of the Bush family. But none of these are the reasons that I love Odessa. When I think about Odessa, I think about the people there. I think about my family, my friends, my teachers, and yes, of course, my neighbors. This was my neighborhood growing up in Odessa. The house on the left is where I spent most of my first 17 years. It was a really important place, and the neighborhood was the center of it. It was where I learned how to ride a bike. It was where I went trick-or-treating over Halloween. And it was where I eagerly waited for Santa Claus every Christmas. I loved my neighborhood because it felt like a community. The neighbors knew each other. They cared for each other. They looked out for each other. They created a warm and nurturing place where I felt safe. I felt like I belonged. Now, this is where I live today. And though you may not know Odessa, Texas, I'm sure everyone in this room knows San Francisco. It's a beautiful city, a wonderful place to live. This is my neighborhood. My wife and 2 children live here. And we love the area, but when we first moved here, something felt a little different. It didn't quite feel like the neighborhood that I'd grown up in. My neighbors were cordial, but a little distant. They were minding their own business, and they probably were hoping that I would mind my own business as well. They seemed to care most what was going on inside their homes, instead of going outside and understanding the community at large. I didn't know my neighbors, and my neighbors didn't know me. Well, it turns out this is not a unique situation. In 2010, when we started my company Nextdoor, the Pew Institute reported that 29% of Americans can only name a few of their neighbors, and a staggering 28% of Americans could not name a single neighbor by name. But this is a stark contrast to the way it was for me growing up. And this is a really, really negative trend, not only in America, but in the rest of the world. There's a Harvard professor named Robert Putnam who's done a great deal of academic research on this topic. His book, Bowling Alone, is a real inspiration for us at Nextdoor, as it talks about the bad effects of losing community and also gives us some clues on how we can restore that sense of community and bring back the healthy neighborhoods that we once had. Why is this trend happening? The simple fact is, we don't actually spend that much time in our neighborhoods, and that leads to social isolation, which, as you can see from the slide here, has some really terrible side effects. Kids fail to thrive, crime goes up, politics get more coarse, and there's no generosity. The reason for this? Well, there are several, according to Putnam. We have more families that have dual working households. Our commutes are longer than ever. And technology has created diversions like television and the internet that keep us inside. We simply don't have time to get to know our neighbors. And this is something that we wanted to do something about. So that's where Nextdoor comes in. We are a social media platform that believes that we can use the power of technology to bring back a sense of community to the neighborhood. In much the same way that Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter make it easy for us to connect with friends and colleagues and people with whom we have shared interests, Nextdoor makes it easy to connect with the people right outside our front door. It's a simple concept, but a powerful one. And the stakes are actually quite high. In Putnam's book, he not only talks about social isolation, but he talks about the other side. What happens in neighborhoods that have tight social connections? What happens in neighborhoods that have a sense of community? You can see that there are measurable benefits in these communities, and that's what we're trying to create with Nextdoor. The response to the company has been tremendous. In a few short years, almost 50,000 neighborhoods in America actively use Nextdoor. This represents over 35% of all neighborhoods in the country. And while it's only the beginning, we hear very exciting stories about what happens when neighbors come together to solve problems. There are a variety of use cases, things that range from straightforward utility to things that are quite essential in our lives. And I want to show you a couple of examples. You can't think about the neighborhood without thinking about babysitting. So we'll start with that quintessential example. All the parents in this room know that it's hard to find a babysitter. I saw this tweet a couple of days ago. It was actually quite funny. Apparently, it's now harder to find a babysitter in Silicon Valley than it is to find a great engineer. Well, this person needs to find Nextdoor because it's easy to find babysitters on Nextdoor or tutors. And if you are a babysitter, Nextdoor is a great place for you to volunteer your services for your neighbors. When it comes to finding service providers, we once looked at the yellow pages. But how about asking your neighbors for advice instead? Chances are the needs they have are needs you have as well. And their recommendations are unbiased and will suit you better than a random looking through the yellow pages. As neighbors come together, they want to get together in person. And so think about events. When's the last time that you got together with your neighbors to have a block party, to have a barbecue, to have an ice cream social or a back-to-school party, or even to come together with neighbors to organize a cleanup and make the neighborhood better for everyone involved? There are more serious use cases. If you're a pet owner and you lose your dog, you can feel desperate, but you can reach out to your neighbors and quickly find your pet with their help, whether it's a dog or a cat, or in this case, a wayward chicken, not one that I've seen before. But the fact is, neighbors want to look out for each other. They want to take care of each other. They want to come together, particularly when it comes to crime and security information. In the last few years, 12 missing children have been found by neighbors coming together on Nextdoor. Thieves have been caught, burglaries have been prevented. And it's a place where you can go simply to get support after something bad happens. Now that's what it's all about, support, community. And when you think about natural disasters, where do we go after something happens, like an earthquake or a flood or a tornado? We go to our neighbors. They have a shared experience. If you're looking for help, you can ask the people in your neighborhood. They want to help, and we've seen it many, many times every single day. Now, I'm the founder of the company, so I obviously want it to be life-changing and think it is, but it's nice to see when someone else says it. So you probably noticed, I've said a couple of times in this talk, bring back a sense of community to the neighborhood. And that phrasing is actually quite intentional. We're at this conference talking about technology, talking about innovation, talking about the new things that this revolution is creating. But when it comes to the neighborhood, we're not creating something new with technology. We're simply bringing something back that always existed. In the case of the neighborhood, the future looks a lot like the past. Now, it's only the beginning. As I mentioned, we're in over 35% of the neighborhoods in the US. We're expanding to Europe later this year, and obviously we hope to get to the rest of the world. One thing I know is that when neighbors start talking, really good things happen. And I hope you give it a try, because I think you'll see the same. Thank you.